The wind carried secrets across the high plains of Colorado that spring morning in 1878, and Isaac Yates read them the way other men read newspapers. He stood on the ridge overlooking Florissant, his hand shading his eyes as he studied the western sky where clouds gathered like conspirators, planning something violent. 3 days, he calculated, maybe less if the system moved faster than expected. The storm would be biblical when it came, the kind that turned dirt roads into rivers and leaked through every weak spot in every roof for miles. His gaze drifted down to the small homestead at the edge of town, where smoke curled from a crooked chimney, and he noticed what he had been noticing for weeks now, the way the roof sagged dangerously on the eastern side, shingles missing like broken teeth. Theresa Brennan had moved to Florissant 6 months ago with nothing but a wagon, a stubborn will, and grief so fresh it seemed to follow her like a shadow. Isaac had heard the story in pieces from the general store owner and the blacksmith's wife. Young widow, 22 years old, husband killed in a mine collapse up in Leadville. No family left to speak of. She had taken the abandoned Henderson place and somehow scraped together enough to make it livable, though livable was a generous word for a structure that looked like it might collapse if you sneezed too hard near it. Isaac was not the kind of man who inserted himself into other people's business without invitation. 26 years old and already tired in ways that had nothing to do with physical labor, he had learned to keep his distance from complications. But he also was not the kind of man who could watch a woman's roof cave in during a storm when he had the skills and the time to prevent it. His father had been a carpenter before consumption took him, and Isaac had learned the trade well enough to build half the newer structures in Florissant. He made a decent living, kept to himself, and tried not to think too much about the fact that his life felt like a book with all the interesting pages torn out. He mounted his horse, a sturdy bay gelding named Prophet, and rode down into town. The morning sun was warm on his shoulders, but that western sky kept nagging at him. 3 days, maybe 2.5 if he was being realistic. Florissant was not much to speak of a main street with a general store, a saloon, a church that doubled as a schoolhouse, and maybe 40 families scattered in the surrounding area. It had started as a supply point for miners heading to the richer deposits further west, but when those dried up or proved less profitable than hoped, Florissant had settled into being a quiet ranching and farming community where nothing much happened, and people liked it that way. Isaac tied Prophet outside the general store and went in to buy nails and tar paper. Tom Hutchins, who ran the store with his wife Mabel, raised an eyebrow at the purchase. "Building something?" Tom asked, measuring out 5 pounds of nails into a bag. "Fixing something," Isaac said, counting out coins. "That Henderson place is going to leak like a sieve when this storm hits." Tom glanced toward the window as if he could see the homestead from there, which he could not. "The Brennan widow. That is kind of you, Isaac. Though I heard she is a proud one, might not take kindly to charity." "Then I will not call it charity," Isaac said, gathering his supplies. "I will call it neighborly good sense. Whole town will suffer if we have to deal with a sick woman or a collapsed roof blocking the road." Tom chuckled. "You always were better at doing the right thing than talking about it." Isaac left before the conversation could continue. He had learned that people in small towns would make a romance out of a man tipping his hat to a woman, and he did not need that kind of speculation following him around. This was practical. This was preventative. This had nothing to do with the way Theresa Brennan's dark hair caught the sunlight when she walked to the store, or the way she held her chin up like she was daring the world to take one more swing at her. He rode out to the Henderson place, which sat about a quarter-mile from the main cluster of town on a piece of land that had good water but poor soil. The house was small, maybe 3 rooms total, built from rough-hewn logs that had seen better days. The roof was the real problem. Whoever had built it originally had done shoddy work, and years of weather had made it worse. Isaac could see from the ground that at least a third of the shingles needed replacing, and he would bet money the support beams underneath were half-rotted. He was still surveying the damage when the front door opened, and Theresa Brennan stepped out with a shotgun cradled in her arms. "That is close enough," she called out, her voice steady. "State your business or turn that horse around." Isaac raised his hands slowly, keeping them visible. "Name is Isaac Yates, madam. I do carpentry work in town. I came to talk to you about your roof." She did not lower the shotgun. Up close, Isaac could see that she was younger than he had thought, with dark eyes that held too much experience for 22 years. She wore a simple brown dress and an apron, her hair pulled back in a practical bun. There was a smudge of flour on her cheek, and he realized he had interrupted her baking. "What about my roof?" she asked. "It is going to fail," Isaac said bluntly. "There is a storm coming in 3 days, maybe sooner. Big one. The kind that will find every weakness in every structure for 20 miles. Your roof will not hold. And you want to fix it out of the goodness of your heart." Her tone was skeptical, edged with something bitter. "What do you want in return?" Isaac had expected this. He kept his voice level, factual. "I want $30 for materials and labor. That is half what I would normally charge for a job this size. I can have it done in 2 days if I start now." $30. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I've got $8 to my name, Mr. Yates. $8 and a bag of beans. So unless you take payment in prayers and good intentions, I think we are finished here." She started to turn back toward the house, and Isaac spoke quickly. "I could use help with the harvest at my place. My brother usually comes up from Denver, but he broke his leg. You work 3 weeks when the time comes, we call it even." Theresa stopped. She turned back slowly, suspicion written clearly across her face. "That is months away. You would do the work now and trust I will show up in September?" "Yes," Isaac said simply. "Why?" It was a fair question. Isaac chose his words carefully. "Because I cannot watch your roof collapse when I could have prevented it. Because this town is small enough that we have to look out for each other. Because you remind me of my mother, who had to make it on her own when my father died, and I remember how hard that was." Something shifted in Theresa's expression. The shotgun lowered slightly. "You understand I am not looking for a husband," she said flatly. "I am not looking for anything except to be left alone to live my life." "I understand," Isaac said. "This is carpentry, not courtship." She studied him for a long moment, and Isaac had the uncomfortable feeling that she could see straight through to every truth he was telling himself about why he was really here. Finally, she nodded once. "All right, but I help with the work. I am not sitting inside while someone fixes my house. I can haul and hold and hand you tools." "Fair enough," Isaac said. He dismounted and started unloading his supplies. "We should start with the inside inspection. I need to see how bad the beams are." Theresa finally set the shotgun just inside the door and led him through the small house. It was cleaner than he had expected. Spare but well kept. She had very little furniture: a table with 2 chairs, a narrow bed in one corner, a wood stove that had been recently blackened, and shelves made from planks and stones. There were curtains at the windows, though, cheerful yellow things that must have been precious to her, because everything else was purely functional. Isaac climbed up on the table to examine the ceiling beams. As he suspected, water damage had compromised the eastern supports. He pressed his knife into the wood and it sank in too easily. How bad? Theresa asked from below. Bad enough that I am surprised it is still standing. You have been lucky. Lucky, she repeated, and this time her laugh was genuine if dark. That is not a word I would use for much lately, Mr. Yates. Isaac, he said, climbing down, and luck is relative. You could be dead. Instead, you are here, in a house that needs work but is fixable, in a town where people generally mind their own business and help when needed. You are a philosopher carpenter, Theresa said, but there was the ghost of a smile at the corner of her mouth. Just a carpenter, Isaac replied. We need to strip the eastern half of the roof completely and replace the support structure before we reshingle. I will need to cut new beams from the lumber at the mill. That sounds expensive. It is included in the $30 I quoted. I get a discount at the mill. They worked out the logistics. Isaac would go to the mill and return with lumber by afternoon. Theresa would clear out anything in the eastern room that she did not want exposed to the elements, just in case. They would start the demolition in the morning and work straight through until it was done. As Isaac rode back toward town, he glanced at the western sky again. The clouds were building faster than he had anticipated. 2 days, he revised. They had 2 days at most. He spent the afternoon at the mill, selecting beams and paying for them to be delivered to the Henderson place. Then he went home to his own small cabin north of town, fed his chickens and his 2 cows, and tried not to think about the way Theresa Brennan had looked at him with those dark, guarded eyes that expected disappointment. Sleep came fitfully. Isaac kept waking to check the sky, watching the clouds advance like an army. When dawn finally broke, he was already up, loading his tools onto a small wagon he borrowed from his neighbor. The lumber had been delivered as promised, stacked near the house. Theresa was waiting for him, wearing work pants that must have belonged to her late husband and a shirt with the sleeves rolled up. Her hair was in a thick braid down her back. "Ready?" Isaac asked. "Ready," Theresa confirmed. They started by stripping the shingles from the damaged section. It was hot, dusty work, and the sun beat down relentlessly as they tore away layers of rotted wood and tar paper. Isaac worked methodically, explaining each step as he went, and Theresa proved to be a quick learner and a hard worker. She did not complain when she got splinters, did not shy away from the heavier lifting, and kept pace with him even as the morning stretched into afternoon. They broke for lunch, eating bread and cheese that Theresa brought out with cool water from her well. They sat in the shade of the house, not talking much, too tired for conversation. "You really think it will rain in 2 days?" Theresa asked, studying the sky. "Tomorrow night," Isaac corrected. "Maybe sooner. Can you feel how the air has changed?" She closed her eyes, breathing in. "Heavier," she said. "Like it is waiting, exactly." "My husband used to say I had good instincts about weather," Theresa said quietly. "He said I was better than the almanac." Then she stopped, as if surprised she had mentioned him at all. Isaac did not push. He just said, "Then you know I am right about the storm." "Yes," she admitted. They went back to work. By evening, the old roof section was completely removed and Isaac had begun the delicate work of replacing the rotted support beams. This required precision. One miscalculation, and the whole structure could shift dangerously. Theresa held the beams steady while Isaac notched and fitted them, her arms trembling with the effort but her grip never faltering. "You are strong," Isaac observed, hammering in a support nail. "I have had to be," Theresa said. When it was finally too dark to see properly, they stopped. Isaac's shoulders ached and his hands were raw despite his calluses. Theresa looked exhausted, her face smudged with dirt and sweat. "You did good work today," Isaac told her. "Really good." "We are on schedule." "Come back at dawn," she asked. "Dawn," he agreed. That night, lying in his bed, Isaac found himself thinking about the way Theresa had looked standing on that ladder, her jaw set with determination, refusing to quit even when he could see she was hurting. There was something in her that called to something in him, some shared understanding of what it meant to keep going when everything inside you wanted to stop. He told himself it was admiration, nothing more. He told himself he was just doing a job. He did not believe himself, but he tried. The next day began earlier, the sky already cloudy when Isaac arrived. They worked with increased urgency now, both feeling the pressure of the approaching storm. Isaac laid the new support beams while Theresa measured and cut shingles to size. They moved like a team, anticipating what the other needed, developing a rhythm that made the work go faster. By midday, the structure was sound. Isaac tested every joint, every nail, making sure nothing would give when the wind hit. Then they began the process of reshingling, working from the bottom up, each row overlapping precisely to channel water away from the vulnerable seams. "Tell me about your mother," Theresa said as they worked. "You said she was on her own." Isaac had not expected the question, but he found he did not mind answering. "My father died when I was 15. Consumption. My mother kept the carpentry business going, raising me and my younger brother. She was tough, had to be, being a widow with 2 boys and bills to pay." "Did she remarry?" "No, she said she had loved once truly, and that was enough for one lifetime." Theresa was quiet for a moment, laying another shingle. "I understand that," she said softly. "You loved your husband," Isaac said. "It was not a question." "I did. We were married 3 years. He was a good man. Patient, kind. He deserved more time than he got." "I am sorry," Isaac said, and meant it. "So am I." She hammered a nail with more force than necessary. "But being sorry does not change anything, so you keep going. You find a place to live, you fix what is broken, you get up every morning and you keep going." "Yes," Isaac said quietly. "You do." They worked in silence after that, but it was a companionable silence, the kind that exists between people who understand each other without needing to explain everything. By late afternoon, with the sky now fully overcast and the wind beginning to pick up, they were down to the final section. Isaac could feel the first drops of rain starting just a spit here and there, the storm's warning shots. His hands moved faster, nailing down the last row of shingles. Theresa was right beside him, handing him nails before he had to ask, holding the tar paper steady against the increasing wind. "Almost there," Isaac said, his voice tense. The sky had gone dark green, the color that meant serious weather. They had minutes now, not hours. He hammered the last nail just as the heavens opened. The rain came down in sheets, so sudden and complete it was like standing under a waterfall. Isaac grabbed the tools and scrambled down the ladder, Theresa right behind him. They ran for the door, bursting into the house soaking wet and breathing hard. For a moment they just stood there, dripping on the floor, staring at each other. Then Theresa started laughing, real laughter, bright and surprised, and Isaac found himself laughing too. They had made it. The roof was done. "We did it," Theresa said, still laughing, pushing wet hair out of her face. "I cannot believe we actually did it." "I told you we would," Isaac said, grinning. He realized it was the first time he had really smiled in months. Outside, the storm raged. Thunder rolled across the valley and lightning flashed, illuminating the small house in bursts of white light. But inside, the ceiling stayed dry. Not a single drop came through. "I should go," Isaac said, though he made no move toward the door. The storm was too violent to ride through safely. "You should stay until this passes," Theresa said firmly. "I am not sending you out in this. You will break your neck or get struck by lightning." She was right, and Isaac knew it. He nodded, setting his tools carefully in the corner. Theresa disappeared into the other room and came back with a towel and a dry shirt. "It was my husband's," she said, handing Isaac the shirt. "It should fit you well enough." Isaac changed, turning away to give them both privacy, and hung his wet shirt by the stove. Theresa did the same, emerging in a dry dress with her hair loose around her shoulders. Isaac tried not to stare. With her hair down, she looked younger, softer. "I have stew," Theresa said. "It is not much, but you must be starving." They were both hungry, Isaac realized. They had worked through lunch without stopping. Theresa ladled out 2 bowls of venison stew, simple but good, seasoned with sage and wild onion. They sat at the small table, eating while the storm battered the walls and the roof held firm above them. "Thank you," Theresa said quietly. "I know I agreed to work your harvest, but that does not seem like enough. You saved more than my roof today." "You do not need to thank me," Isaac said. "You worked just as hard as I did. But you knew what to do, you made it possible." She met his eyes across the table. "Why did you really come? And do not tell me it was because I remind you of your mother." Isaac set down his spoon. He could lie, could retreat behind some comfortable fiction. "But Theresa deserved better than that. Because I saw you at the general store 6 weeks ago," he said slowly. "You were buying flour and you were counting out coins so carefully, making sure you had enough. The way you held yourself, like you were carrying the weight of the world but refused to buckle under it. And I thought, there is someone who understands what it is to keep fighting even when you are tired of fighting. I wanted to know you. I wanted to help you. But I did not know how to do that without it seeming like something it was not." "And what was it not supposed to seem like?" Theresa asked, her voice careful. "Like I had expectations. Like I was trying to buy my way into your good graces. Like I wanted something from you that you did not want to give." Theresa was quiet for a long moment. Outside, the rain continued its assault. "And what is it you want, Isaac Yates?" Isaac took a breath. "Honestly, I do not know. I just know that I have felt like I was sleepwalking through my life for the past year, going through the motions but not really living. And then I saw you and something woke up. I am not asking you to feel anything or do anything about that. I'm just telling you the truth because you asked." "I cannot," Theresa started, then stopped. "I am not ready for anything. It has only been 8 months since Jacob died. 8 months and I still wake up reaching for him. I still set out 2 plates before I remember." "I know," Isaac said gently. "I am not asking you to be ready. I am just glad I got to know you a little bit, that I got to spend these 2 days working beside you. You are not like other men I have known," Theresa said. "Most would have pushed, would have expected something in return for the help. Then they were fools." She smiled at that, a real smile that reached her eyes. "Maybe," she said. "Or maybe you are the unusual one." They talked late into the night, long after the stew was finished. They talked about their families, their pasts, their dreams that had died and the smaller hopes that had taken their place. Theresa told him about growing up in Kansas, about marrying Jacob when she was 19, about the brief, happy years before the mine collapse. Isaac told her about learning carpentry from his father, about watching his mother struggle, about feeling like he was meant for something but not knowing what. The storm blew itself out sometime after midnight. When Isaac finally stepped outside, the world was clean and fresh, the air cool and clear. The sky had cleared enough to show stars. "Your roof is perfect," Isaac said, looking up at his work. "Did not leak a drop." "Thanks to you," Theresa said from the doorway. "Thanks to us," Isaac corrected. He collected profit from where the horse had taken shelter near the small barn. "I will come by in a few days, make sure everything's settled right. Sometimes things shift after a big rain." "I would like that," Theresa said. Isaac rode home through the muddy darkness, his heart feeling lighter than it had in months. He did not know what would happen next. He did not know if Theresa would ever be ready to let someone else in. But for the first time in a long time, he felt like the story of his life might have some interesting pages left after all. True to his word, Isaac came by 3 days later to inspect the roof. Everything had held perfectly. He found himself making excuses to visit after that, bringing by a chair he had built that he said he had no use for, dropping off vegetables from his garden, asking her advice about a chicken that seemed poorly. Theresa saw through every excuse, he was sure, but she never turned him away. Summer deepened into July, then August. Isaac and Theresa fell into an easy friendship. They had dinners together occasionally, sat on her porch in the evenings talking about everything and nothing. She came to town more often, always stopping to say hello when she saw him working. People noticed, of course, and people talked, but neither of them paid it much mind. It was in late August when things shifted again. Isaac had brought her a rocking chair he had made, beautiful smooth wood with a curved back that fit the body perfectly. Theresa ran her hand over it with wonder. "This is too fine," she said. "This must have taken you weeks." 6, Isaac admitted. "I wanted it to be right." "Isaac, I cannot accept this. This is the kind of thing you sell for serious money." "I made it for you," Isaac said. "Please let me give you this." Theresa sat in the chair slowly, rocking gently. Tears filled her eyes. "No one has given me anything this beautiful since Jacob died. Everyone has been kind but practical. Food, advice, hand-me-downs. But this is beautiful just to be beautiful." "You deserve beautiful things," Isaac said quietly. She looked up at him, and something in her expression was different. "Come here," she said softly. Isaac knelt beside the rocking chair. Theresa reached out and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "I have been thinking," she said, "about what it means to be alive versus just surviving. For months I have just been surviving, telling myself that was enough. But you have reminded me what it feels like to be alive, to look forward to something, to want tomorrow to come." "Theresa," Isaac said, his heart pounding. "Let me finish," she said. "I love Jacob. I will always love Jacob. That does not go away. But he would not want me to be alone forever. He would not want me to shut myself off from ever feeling anything again. And you, Isaac Yates, you make me feel things I thought I was done feeling." "What kind of things?" Isaac asked, his voice rough. "Hope," Theresa said. "Joy, excitement, and yes, something more than friendship, something that scares me because it is too soon and I should not feel this way and what will people think? But I do feel it, and I am tired of pretending I do not." Isaac lifted her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. "I have been falling in love with you since the day you pointed a shotgun at me," he said. "Maybe before that, but I will go at whatever pace you need. I will wait as long as it takes." "What if I do not want to wait?" Theresa whispered. Isaac stood, pulling her up with him. For a moment they just stood there, inches apart, both trembling slightly. Then Theresa closed the distance and kissed him. It was soft at first, tentative, like she was testing something fragile. But then Isaac's arms came around her and she melted into him, and the kiss deepened into something that felt like coming home after a long journey. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Theresa was crying again. "I am sorry," she said. "This is not sad crying. This is too many feelings crying." Isaac wiped her tears with his thumbs, cradling her face in his hands. "You never have to apologize for feelings," he said. "Not with me." They sat together in the rocking chair, Theresa in Isaac's lap, his arms wrapped around her, and watched the sun set over the Colorado mountains. It was not the ending of one story or the beginning of another. It was the middle of something ongoing, complicated, real. September came, and with it harvest time. Theresa showed up at Isaac's property as promised, ready to work. But she came as more than a laborer repaying a debt. She came as his partner, his love, the woman who had opened up a future he had thought was closed to him. They worked the harvest together over 3 weeks, bringing in wheat and corn, picking apples from the small orchard Isaac maintained. Other neighbors came to help as was customary, and everyone could see the way Isaac and Theresa moved around each other, the casual touches, the shared glances, the comfortable intimacy of two people who belonged together. On the last day of harvest, as they stored the final bushel of apples in Isaac's root cellar, he turned to her and said, "Move in with me." Theresa raised an eyebrow. "That would scandalize the whole town, Isaac Yates." "Then marry me first," Isaac said. "I know it is fast. I know people will talk, but I do not want to spend another night without you. I do not want to wake up in a bed you are not in. Marry me, Theresa. Make this life with me." Theresa was quiet for so long that Isaac's heart began to sink. Then she smiled, slow and bright. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you. Not because I need rescuing or because I owe you anything, but because I love you. Because you saw me when I was at my lowest and you did not try to fix me or save me. You just helped with my roof and let me figure out the rest." They were married in October, in the small church in Florissant with half the town in attendance. Theresa wore a simple blue dress that brought out her eyes, and Isaac wore his best suit with a flower in his buttonhole. Reverend Matthews, who had buried Theresa's first husband and had worried about the young widow, seemed genuinely delighted to perform this ceremony. "I have seen a lot of marriages," he said during the ceremony. "Some are about property, some about convenience, some about passion that will burn out in a year. But you two have something rarer. You have partnership. You have respect. You have the kind of love that will last because it is built on friendship and mutual regard. That is the foundation that will hold when storms come, and storms will come, but you already know how to weather storms together." Isaac slipped a simple gold band onto Theresa's finger, and she did the same for him. When they kissed, the congregation erupted in applause and cheers. The celebration afterward was held at the town hall, with food brought by every family and dancing that lasted until late. Isaac danced with his new wife, holding her close, feeling like the luckiest man alive. "No regrets," he whispered in her ear. "Not a single one," Theresa whispered back. "You are my future, Isaac. Thank you for being patient enough to let me figure that out." They spent their wedding night in Isaac's cabin, which was now their cabin. Theresa had sold the Henderson place to a young family moving in from the east, and she brought her few possessions to merge with his. The yellow curtains she had loved went up in their bedroom window, a splash of color and cheer. Their first winter together was cold and long, but they did not mind. They were snug in their well-built cabin with a sound roof and enough food stored to last until spring. They spent evenings by the fire, Isaac carving or reading while Theresa sewed or worked on preserves. They talked about their plans expanding the orchard, maybe getting more livestock, building a bigger barn. "You want children?" Theresa asked one night in January, as snow fell softly outside. Isaac looked up from the piece of wood he was shaping into a bowl. "Do you?" "I think I do," Theresa said carefully. "Not to replace what I had before, but to build something new, with you, a family that is ours." "Then yes," Isaac said, setting aside his work. "I want that very much." It was spring when Theresa realized she was pregnant. She told Isaac on a bright April morning as they were planting the garden, and his whoop of joy scared the chickens into a fluttering panic. He picked her up and spun her around, then immediately set her down again, worried he had been too rough. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," Theresa laughed. "You can still touch me." "I know, Isaac ran his hands through his hair, grinning like a fool. "We are going to have a baby." "We are," Theresa confirmed, and she looked so happy, so radiant that Isaac had to kiss her right there in the half-planted garden. The pregnancy was not easy. Theresa was sick for the first 3 months, barely able to keep food down. Isaac learned to make ginger tea and bland porridge, to rub her back when she ached, to hold her hair when the nausea won. He worried constantly, but Theresa remained determinedly optimistic. "This is normal," she would say. "This is just what happens. The baby is fine, I am fine, we are going to be fine." By summer she was feeling better, her belly starting to round with new life. They set up a cradle in the bedroom one Isaac built from cherry wood, smooth and strong. Theresa sewed tiny clothes and blankets, her face soft with maternal anticipation. In September, exactly 1 year after they had worked the harvest together that first time, Theresa went into labor. It was long and difficult. The midwife, Mrs. Patterson from town, stayed with them for 18 hours while Theresa labored. Isaac held her hand, wiped her forehead, told her she was strong, told her she could do this. "I cannot," Theresa gasped at one point, her face pale with exhaustion. "Isaac, I cannot do this anymore." "You can," Isaac said firmly, squeezing her hand. "You are the strongest person I know. You survived loss and poverty and starting over with nothing. You can do this. Our baby is almost here." And finally, as dawn broke on a cool September morning, their son was born. He came out screaming, red-faced and furious at the world, and Theresa laughed through her tears as Mrs. Patterson placed him on her chest. "A boy," the midwife said, smiling. Healthy and strong, lunged. Isaac stared at his son with wonder. The baby was impossibly small, impossibly perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, a shock of dark hair, and eyes that opened to look around with vague confusion. "Hello," Isaac whispered, touching one tiny hand. The baby's fingers closed around his, gripping tight. "Hello, little one, I am your father. What should we name him?" Theresa asked, exhausted but glowing. They had discussed names for months but never settled on anything. Now, looking at their son, Isaac said, "Jacob. After your first husband, he was part of your story, and that is all right. He would have wanted you to be happy. This feels like a way to honor that." Theresa's eyes filled with tears. "Are you certain? You do not mind?" "I am certain," Isaac said. "Jacob Yates. It sounds right." So Jacob he became. Baby Jacob was a good child, quick to smile and curious about everything. He grew fast, hitting milestones that amazed his parents. When he took his first steps at 10 months, tottering from Theresa to Isaac across their small living room, they both cheered like he had won a prize. Life settled into a rhythm. Isaac continued his carpentry work, building up a reputation that brought customers from surrounding towns. Theresa managed their home and property, raising Jacob, selling eggs and preserves for extra income. They were not rich, but they were comfortable. More importantly, they were happy. When Jacob was 2, Theresa became pregnant again. This time she knew what to expect, and while she was still sick, it was not quite as bad. Their daughter was born in May of 1881, an easier birth than the first. She came out quietly, looking around with solemn dark eyes as if taking stock of her new world. "She looks like you," Isaac said, studying his daughter's face. "She has your nose," Theresa countered, laughing. They named her Alina after Isaac's mother, who had passed the previous winter. Theresa had never met her mother-in-law, but she knew how much Isaac had loved and respected her. Alina seemed to suit their daughter, who proved to be a thoughtful, observant child even from infancy. The years passed in that way years do when life is good quickly, but full of moments worth remembering. Jacob grew into a sturdy boy who loved helping his father in the workshop, who could hammer a nail straight by the time he was 5. Alina was quieter, more bookish, but she had her mother's steel underneath the soft exterior. In 1883, when Jacob was 4 and Eleanor 2, a severe drought hit Colorado. Crops failed across the region, and many families struggled. Isaac and Theresa were better off than most. Isaac's carpentry skills were always needed, drought or not, but they saw their neighbors suffering and did what they could to help. "We should organize a community meal," Theresa said one evening. "Get everyone to contribute what they can, pool resources. We will all eat less, but no one will starve. The church might let us use their hall," Isaac suggested. They did organize it with Reverend Matthew's enthusiastic support. Every Sunday after service, the community gathered for a shared meal. Those who had more brought more. Those who had less brought what they could. No one kept score. No one shamed anyone for needing help. It was what neighbors did for each other. The drought broke in 1884 with torrential rains that flooded the valley. Isaac found himself doing emergency repairs on half the buildings in town, fixing roofs and walls damaged by water. He thought about that first roof he had fixed, Theresa's roof, and how it had led to everything good in his life. When he mentioned this to Theresa, she smiled. "You saw the storm coming 3 days out," she said. "My roof was done before the first drop fell. You saved more than shingles that day, Isaac. You saved me." "No," Isaac said, pulling her close. "We saved each other." More children came: a son named Thomas in 1885, another daughter named Caroline in 1887. Their small cabin became crowded, and in 1888 Isaac built an addition, doubling their living space. The children helped as they were able, even young Caroline handing her father nails and trying to hammer with a tool almost as big as she was. Life was not without difficulties. There were lean years and sick children and arguments about money or discipline, or whose turn it was to deal with the chickens. But through it all, Isaac and Theresa maintained the partnership they had built from the beginning. They talked through problems, compromised, supported each other through hard times. In 1890, when Isaac was 38 and Theresa 34, they took their 4 children on a trip to Denver. It was the first time Theresa had been to a real city since moving to Florissant, and the children's eyes were huge as they took in the tall buildings and paved streets and electric lights. "This is amazing," Jacob said, 12 years old and convinced Denver was the most sophisticated place on earth. "It is certainly different from home," Theresa agreed, holding tight to 6-year-old Caroline's hand so she would not wander off. They stayed 3 days, visiting museums and parks, eating restaurant food that seemed impossibly fancy. But on the train ride home, Eleanor looked out at the mountains and said, "I like Florissant better. This is where we belong." "Me too," Theresa said, and Isaac squeezed her hand in agreement. They were home people, rooted to their land and their community. That was not a limitation, it was a choice they had made together, and they were content with it. As the children grew older, life grew both easier and more complicated. Jacob showed real talent for carpentry and started working alongside his father. Eleanor excelled at her studies and dreamed of becoming a teacher. Thomas was the adventurous one, always bringing home injured animals to nurse or climbing trees that were too tall. Caroline was the social butterfly, friends with every child in town and most of the adults too. "We made good humans," Theresa said one evening, watching the children play outside while she and Isaac sat on the porch in matching rocking chairs. He had built a second one to match the first. "We did," Isaac agreed, "though I think the credit goes mostly to you." "It is a partnership," Theresa said, echoing words he had spoken years ago, "like everything else we do." In 1895, on their 15th wedding anniversary, Isaac surprised Theresa with a trip back to the Henderson place, now owned by the Donnelly family, who had fixed it up considerably. With their permission, Isaac and Theresa walked around the property, remembering. "This is where I stood when I threatened you with my shotgun," Theresa said, laughing at the memory. "This is where I thought you were the most beautiful, terrifying woman I had ever seen," Isaac replied. They found the spot where they had worked on the roof together, now covered by a new, even sturdier structure the Donnellys had built. But the bones of Isaac's original work were still there, still sound. 15 years, Theresa mused. It feels like forever and no time at all. "Should we go for 15 more?" Isaac asked. "Let us go for 50 more," Theresa said. "At least." They did not get 50 more years. Life rarely grants that wish, but they got many good years. They saw Jacob marry at 21 and start his own carpentry business. They saw Alina become a teacher in Florissant's expanded school. They watched Thomas head west to California, seeking adventure, though he wrote faithfully every month. They danced at Caroline's wedding when she was 19, marrying a young rancher from the next valley over. They became grandparents, which Theresa had not expected to bring her such joy. But holding Jacob's first child, a daughter named Theresa after her grandmother, she felt a completion to her story that she had not known was missing. "Look what we made," she whispered to Isaac, who was standing beside her, equally enchanted by the tiny baby. "Look what came from fixing a roof." "Look what came from being brave enough to let someone help," Isaac corrected gently. In 1910, Isaac and Theresa celebrated their 35th wedding anniversary surrounded by children and grandchildren. The party was held at their homestead, which had grown over the years into a proper small ranch. Isaac was 63 and still working, though he moved slower now and let Jacob handle the more strenuous jobs. Theresa was 57, her dark hair now streaked with silver, her face lined but still beautiful to Isaac. "Give us a speech," the grandchildren demanded, and Isaac stood slowly, taking Theresa's hand to pull her up beside him. "I am not much for speeches," Isaac said, "but I will say this. 35 years ago I saw a storm coming and I saw a woman who needed help. I told myself I was being practical, neighborly. But the truth is, I was already half in love with her before I even knew her name. And every day since, she has given me more reasons to love her. She is my partner, my best friend, the mother of my children, and the reason my life has been worth living. So here is to Theresa, and to however many more years we get together." Everyone raised their glasses and Theresa wiped her eyes, laughing at herself for crying. "You old fool," she said fondly, "making me cry at my own party." "You love it," Isaac said, and kissed her while their family cheered. They got 7 more years. Good years, filled with more grandchildren and the quiet satisfaction of a life well lived. Isaac taught his grandsons carpentry, passing on the skills his father had taught him. Theresa helped Alina in the schoolhouse, reading to the younger children and telling them stories. They took walks together in the evenings when weather permitted, hand in hand, still finding new things to talk about after 4 decades together. Isaac died in his sleep in the winter of 1917, at 70 years old. It was peaceful. He went to bed beside Theresa and simply did not wake up. The doctor said his heart had finally worn out, which seemed fitting. He had given his heart fully to his family for so long. Perhaps it simply had nothing left to give. Theresa grieved, but differently than she had grieved Jacob all those years ago. This grief was softer, sadder but not devastating. She had been given 42 years with Isaac, had built a life and a family that would continue long after both of them were gone. That was more than most people got, and she was grateful for every moment. She lived another 6 years, dying in 1923 at 70. She spent those final years surrounded by family, telling stories about Isaac, about their life together, about the day he came to fix her roof and ended up fixing her heart too. On her last day, lucid and clear-eyed in her bed with her children and grandchildren gathered around, she looked at Jacob and said, "Tell me again about the rocking chair." Jacob, now 44 and gray at the temples, smiled. "Father spent 6 weeks building you a rocking chair. When he gave it to you, you cried because it was the first beautiful thing anyone had given you in so long, and you kissed him and everything changed." "Yes," Theresa whispered, smiling. "Everything changed, all because he saw a storm coming and decided to help." "Tell my grandchildren to do that, Jacob. Tell them to see the storms coming, to help when they can, to be brave enough to love even when it scares them." "I will, Mother," Jacob promised, holding her hand. "Tell them their grandfather was the best man I ever knew, and that I loved him from the moment he climbed down from that roof with splinters in his hands and hope in his eyes." Those were her last words. She died peacefully that evening, and when they laid her to rest beside Isaac in the fluorescent cemetery, the whole town turned out to pay respects to a woman who had arrived alone and scared and had somehow become the heart of their community. Years later, when Jacob's grandchildren asked him about his parents, he would tell them the story about the cowboy who saw the storm coming 3 days out, about how he made sure her roof was done before the first drop fell, about how sometimes helping someone means more than just fixing what is broken. It means showing up, doing the work, and trusting that good things can still happen even after loss. "They built something that lasted," Jacob would say. "Not just a roof, but a life, a family, a love that was strong enough to weather any storm. And it all started because my father was the kind of man who could not stand by and watch someone suffer when he had the skills to help." The rocking chair Isaac built still sat on the porch of the old homestead, carefully maintained by generations of Yates family members. It became tradition that when young couples in the family got engaged, they would sit together in that chair and hear the story of Isaac and Theresa, of the roof and the storm and the love that grew from simple kindness. And in Florissant, Colorado, in the shadow of the mountains where storms still rolled in with dramatic fury, the story was told and retold. The story of how one man saw trouble coming, chose to help, and found everything he had been looking for in the process. The story of how a woman who thought she was done with love learned to be brave enough to try again. The story of a roof that held firm and a love that held firmer still. It was not a story about grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It was simpler than that, and more powerful for its simplicity. It was a story about seeing what needs to be done and doing it. About the kind of love that builds slowly, steadily, one careful nail at a time, until you look up and realize you have constructed something that will last forever. The storm that Isaac had predicted did come, exactly when he said it would. The rain fell hard and long, flooding the valley, damaging buildings, causing chaos. But when it passed and people emerged to assess the destruction, they saw that the Henderson place stood dry and secure, its new roof having done exactly what it was built to do. Nobody knew then that the roof was the least important thing Isaac had saved that week. That the real miracle was not in carpentry but in connection, not in shingles but in souls finding each other across grief and loneliness and fear. But Isaac knew, and Theresa knew, and in the end, that was enough. Their great-grandchildren still lived in Colorado as the 20th century wore on. They became teachers and ranchers and business people and artists. Some stayed in Florissant, others scattered across the country. But they all carried with them the story of Isaac and Theresa, and the simple, profound truth at the heart of it. That love is action, that helping matters, that the storms we weather together make us stronger than the storms we face alone. And sometimes, late at night when the wind picked up and thunder rumbled across the mountains, descendants of Isaac and Theresa would look up at their roof sturdy, well-built, sound, and think of that long-ago cowboy who saw a storm coming 3 days out and made sure a lonely widow's roof was done before the first drop fell. They would think about everything that simple act of kindness had created, all the lives that had flowed from that one decision to help, and they would be grateful. The end.